Hello, BookTube. Well, it's Tuesday, and that means Tag Tuesday. I wasn't tagged in anything because I'm a lepa, a pariah on BookTube, but I still like to do tags, and I saw one. Book Time with Ryan did a tag, I think about a year ago, called the Whale tag. Of course, nobody tagged me, but I saw it again on Micah Cummins' channel. Micah Cummins has made a couple of videos, made a tentative toe in the water return to BookTube, and he did the Whale tag. So I voxed him and said, well, you're going to tag me, right? And he said, no, I'm not. And I said, well, why not? And he said, because you're a loser. Such a mean guy. but even though he didn't tag me, even though all the rest of you don't tag me, I still thought I would do this tag, which is all about whales. And each of the prompts is a different species of whale. And I'm pretty sure that I will be the only booktuber who will do this tag who has seen all of these whales with his own eyes. And we start, of course, with the biggie, the blue whales. Question number one, prompt number one is blue whale. The blue whale is the largest, heaviest animal on Earth ever. What's the longest book you've read or want to read, and what's the heaviest subject you read about? And the front runner here for me is the longest book that I've ever read, but it also has a strong contention for one of the heaviest subjects, which is Reclaiming History by Vincent Bugliosi, about the assassination of John F. Kennedy. It's a gigantic brick of a thing, 2,000 pages long, and it's got a disc in the back with 2,000 more pages of endnotes and whatnot, and further elaborations and discussions, but some of those endnotes are dozens of pages long, some of them are hundreds of pages long, so they're definitely narrative. I just don't think you could make a book that would have all of that material in it, which is a bit of a shame, because who has a device that can read a disc anymore? I don't. Unless I were to power up one of my very old MacBooks, that disc is now locked off to me. Unless somebody, if I were Bugliosi, I would kill myself first of all. But if I were Bugliosi, I would probably ask if maybe it was possible for the publisher to print a book of those notes. I would buy it. But anyway, it's really good. But that is definitely the longest, I think. Then prompt number two is sperm whale. Sperm whales routinely dive to a depth of 2,000 feet to feed on squid, but can dive to a depth of 10,000 feet. What is a book that has motivated you to look deeper into a subject, character, situation, or series? And for me, this is an old book, almost a century old, I think, by Lawrence Tanner, about the princes in the Tower. The heirs of King Edward, who Richard, Duke of Gloucester, took into the Tower of London for their own safety, and they were never seen again. And history has blackened Richard's name ever since as simply killing his nephews in order to come to the throne. And I had only seen thumbnail mentions of the Princes in the Tower until I read this book, the Tanner book, and it inflamed my curiosity to read a lot more about them, to read all the primary sources on how you would come to a conclusion on the subject one way or another. And of course, later I read Josephine Tey's novel, The Daughter of Time, which rehashes the whole subject again, and it inflamed a whole generation of people to go into studying history and realizing how exciting it can be. And I've never stopped. Since then, there's never a serious rehash of the Princes in the Tower, or even unserious ones, that I don't read with careful attention. Even though I don't think the subject is open to question at all. I think it's pretty obvious what happened. But that'll be my example, The Princes in the Tower, always up for a new book on the subject. Then we have Humpback Whale, which will be familiar to all of you as the world's most familiar kind of whale, but also from a Star Trek movie, George and Gracie, Star Trek 4. Humpback whales sing long, complex songs that have in common with other individual humpback whales. These songs can change uniformly for entire groups of whales. What is a book that has changed meaning for you over the years, and why did it change? And here I want to mention two books that I've praised on this channel before. You can't get them anymore. You'd have to get a used copy. They're two novels by Jeremy Levin that are wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. One is called Creator, and one is called Satan, His Psychotherapy and Cure, by the unfortunate Dr. Kaslik, JSPS, just some poor schmuck. And they are wonderful, and I go back to them. I always get something more out of them. They are just outpourings of narrative genius, and lots of fun to read. And the reason why the question was, what changed meaning for you over the years, is that they're also, in addition to being narratively exuberant, they're also wise books in ways that, especially with Satan, His Psychotherapy and Cure, you might miss because of the antics of the plot. But there's a lot of wisdom packed into those pages, a lot of earned life wisdom, which, that is one of the reasons why rereading and re-encountering a book is so enjoyable, because you're steadily gaining that yourself. If it's already in the book that you're reading at 25 or 35 or 45, you might miss it. It certainly won't resonate with you the same way. That's why I like to go back to books that the author has done me the honor of pouring everything but the kitchen sink into, right? Even a book like The Saltweed Factor by John Barth, I go back to it because there's a lot the author poured into it. Or Gravity's Rainbow, for instance. Then the next prompt is Orca. Orcas, or killer whales, are incredibly smart social whales, in parentheses, dolphins. What's a book you felt was especially smart, fiction or nonfiction, and made you really think? Of course, at the time that I'm making this tag, orcas are in the news because the people have noticed that, I think it's off the coast of Spain, in one particular area, one particular pod of orcas has started very intentionally attacking sailing yachts. Where in the exact same place, at the exact same kind of ship, would have been completely ignored by them a decade ago. You'd still seen them. If you'd been lounging on the deck of your yacht, you would still have seen them. They might have come close to take a look at you, but they would have ignored you completely. Now they're ripping rudders off. They're ripping propellers off. And the theory is that one disaffected orca is teaching this behavior to other orcas. I haven't quite dug into it enough to know where that speculation comes from. Why would anyone say that? You would have to have some sort of indication of that. And the only indication that I could think of that would lead you to that idea is that people noticed and identified one particular orca who was doing it first, and knew from observation orcas that orca spent time with, and now they're doing it. That's the only way I can think where you would come up with that idea. I think it's fascinating either way. But in answer to the question here, I want to name a new release. It's out in the UK, but it's not out in America yet, but I loved it. It's called Beyond the Wall, A History of East Germany by Katja Heuer. And it's all about... oh, no, wait. I've jumped ahead. No, for number 4, it's a book that you felt was especially smart and that really made you think. And for me, it's Apple II, The Apple II Age, How the Computer Became Personal by Lane or Laney Nooney, which we saw on this channel. It's about the Apple II computer, and it goes into great details about the personalities of the men and women who dreamt this up, perfected it, worked out its bugs, made all sorts of design and software compromises. But it's so much more than that. It's been sticking with me. The books that I'm listing here, I already mentioned Beyond the Wall, is also sticking with me. It's been sticking with me. The Apple II Age is terrific. I would argue it's just tremendously thought-provoking. Just a really deeper approach to this subject than it needed to be. You could have written a book like this. I could imagine a book like this that wasn't anywhere near as good as this thing is. And I would urge you all to read it, since no matter how young you are, you've lived through a lot of this age. Even if you are a so-called digital native, you've seen computers change in your own lifetime, and a lot of people who are watching this channel will remember the Apple II computer, will remember suddenly the idea of a personal computer. Would I ever use such a thing? Isn't it just a glorified calculator? How different our worlds are now. I loved it. I thought it was really well done. Now we'll move on to East Germany with the next prompt, which is Beluga. Belugas are nicknamed the canaries of the sea because of the sounds they make. I kind of thought I was the canary of the sea, but I guess not. What's a book you wanted to talk to others about after reading, and why? And that is Beyond the Wall by Katja Heuer. Although I have to admit, I have this feeling often. I haven't had it all that often in 2023. And I love it when I do have it. That particular kind of book, 2023 hasn't had a whole lot of standout traffic along these lines. I mentioned Beyond the Wall, and I mentioned the Apple II Age, but some of you remember, last year or the year before that, I was going on and on about M, Son of the Century by Antonio Scarlatti. And that was very much the kind of thing where I wanted to grab the readers that I know and say, oh, you've got to read this. Let me tell you about it. I love that feeling. When a book does that, I love that feeling. Because that feeling, believe it or not, ironically, I love that feeling because it's completely non-critical. It's not a case of me saying, of someone saying, "Oh, have you read the latest such and such?" And I say, "Yes, I have." And here's the positive docket, and here's the negative docket, and here's what I think about it. Let's estimate whether or not you should read it. It's not that. It's not a critical response. When you want, hey baby, how are you doing? You want to come down here and give them some Frieda yoga? Huh? Ooh, 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 there she goes. This kind of response is something different. This is when you want to just rush out and grab somebody because the book is just so good. I don't think I've had that feeling yet for 2023. I realize that thanks to the nature of the publishing industry, the bulk of 2023's books have yet to appear. But I love that feeling, specifically because that you've got to read this feeling. I love that because it doesn't involve criticism. It doesn't involve a critical assessment of the book. It's just a galvanic response, one reader to another, because we all want that feeling, that hair standing on end feeling, that incredible excitement feeling where a book is just a firecracker going off in your mind. Unfortunately, a lot of booktube channels either heavily monetize lying about that feeling or have reduced themselves to the point where they let themselves feel that about anything. And so every single video is them going, "Oh my God." I don't do that. Most of you don't do that. You cheapen that feeling when you grant it to mediocre books. So I try not to do that. But I love it when it happens. And Beyond the Wall and the Apple II Age, they're not quite there. I very much like both of them, and both of them have stuck with me. So I think that pretty much any reader, they're both nonfiction, but I think pretty much any reader would like them both. That's not quite the same as what we're talking about. Not to run out and yell to people, but maybe it'll happen. Maybe it'll happen. It only happened a couple of times last year, so I can't expect much. Then the next prompt is narwhal. Male narwhals, known as the unicorns of the sea. I kind of thought I was the unicorn of the sea. I guess not. Have 2 teeth, including one long spiraling tooth that can grow to nearly 9 feet long. What's a book you heard great things about before reading, only to discover that it was less magical after reading it? And I didn't even come up with an example here because this happens to me all the time. All the time. Despite how much at head reading I do, how much of time I spend reading books that aren't published yet, despite that fact, how much of that I do, I routinely encounter fellow critics of mine, other book critics in published genres, in published venues, singing the praises of books that got through me. They got past my net, and this critic read them instead. And like a fool, I read their effusions on these books and think, wow, it must be something to that. And then I read it almost inevitably. I'm thinking, what on earth? What on earth is going on here? This piece of retried crap evoked that response in you? That's insane. And that happens a lot. So I didn't even come up with an individual book because that happens to me all the time. One reading of the New York Times Book Review is enough to do that a few times. Then we have number 7 is Bowhead Whale. While it's evident bowhead whales live well beyond 100 years of age, there's evidence they may live to be 200 years old. What's the oldest book in your collection, and what book has been in your collection the longest? 2 very different questions. The book that's been in my collection the longest is a one-volume encyclopedia from a million years ago that I love. I actually still go back to it sometimes. I do still use it as a reference work, which I have to think is kind of rare for a book that's so old. It was the reference work of my youth. It was, an invaluable help. It's a curiosity now. I happened at the Brattle to find a brand new copy. It looks like it's never been touched. That copy replaced my old copy that was in a million pieces. It had literally broken apart from its binding. I'd used it so much. So I was just keeping the random pages. I very, very ceremoniously gave that thing an honorable burial, and now I have the book. But that's the oldest, the book that I've had the longest. The oldest book in my collection is antique. It's very old. It's centuries old. And it's not actually in my collection. It's in a safe deposit box here in Boston. I don't have it with my books or anything like that. I never look at it. I have it. I have an ebook of it. I have a paperback of it. I have a hardcover of it. I don't need to consult this particular edition but an old friend of mine a long time ago spent real money that he couldn't really afford at the time, to buy this thing for me, under the mistaken impression that I am the kind of bookish person who really values first editions or rare editions or whatever. I don't value them. And I think I might have told him that, but when I've had other people do this, never at this exorbitant length, but I've had other people do this where they think, well, I know you say this, but it's a gift-giving occasion of some kind, and I know you like books, so I'm just going to do this anyway. I'm just going to give you a first edition or something or other. And really, the people who do that, I don't want to seem ungrateful here, but the people who do that are being incredibly rude. What they're really doing, I know the thought is all that counts, but what they're really doing there is saying, not only is this a gift I want you to have, but these are also personal habits that I want you to have. I want you to throw out the personal habits that you have and that I know you have, and adopt new personal habits. I want you to suddenly have this book that you're never going to read, you're never going to open it, you're going to keep it in a bag away from sunlight, you're going to take real care of it. I know for a fact, because I've been over to your living room for wine and calzones, that you don't treat your books that way. But so this book is really, it's really my demand that you adopt a new lifestyle. And that's really rude to do, even if it's done as a gift on a gift-giving occasion with hugs and whatnot. And I've had people do that, and I'm not saying that this really old book in a safe deposit box here in Boston was done that way, but it was awful akin to it. The friend who gave me this book a long time ago knew perfectly well that he had never seen a rare edition anywhere in my collection. I'm sure he'd heard me talk about them in exactly the way I'm talking about them now, and he did it anyway. So I never look at it. I haven't looked at it in years. I just don't bother with it. Then the next prompt is Atlantic gray whale. Atlantic gray whales were sadly wiped out by humans. Today, only the Pacific gray whale remains. Save the whales. What's one book that's either out of print or out of fashion that you wish would make a comeback? And here I have a million, but it depends on what we mean by a comeback. Once upon a time, making a comeback meant that Gore Vidal would praise you in the New Yorker and suddenly someone would rush your books back into print in bookstores. But as we talked about in great length in last night's Steve stream, how viable is that anymore? And who cares anymore? Who even notices anymore? Now I would be willing to argue that the old style of making a comeback in the literary world is gone. And then if we grant that, then what is the new style of making a literary comeback? Is that somebody at the New York Review of Books reprint line notices you and suddenly you've got, James Wood talking about you in the New Yorker? I don't know. I don't know what it would constitute to make a literary comeback. I jotted down Georgette Heyer, Jean Plady, and Marjorie Allingham. All three are terrific writers. All three would definitely find new readership today. But I don't know the in-print status of any of them, except as ebooks. But can you make a comeback only as an ebook? I don't know if you can or not. I don't know what the term means anymore. I'd love to see more people experience these authors. They're all terrific in their own way. But I'm going to have to, that's as far as I'm going to be able to go. Then there's a bonus here, which is Moby Dick. It was a sperm whale. Moby Dick was the great white sperm whale Captain Ahab never caught. What is a book you want to own but haven't found or bought? What's stopping you from hooking that book? For me, it's 3 books, and I've mentioned it on this channel before. I just haven't made myself do it yet. I haven't got that random, unexpected commission check in the mail that I didn't plot for. I'd forgotten about it, so it wasn't part of the budget. Haven't got a windfall of any kind like that, so I just haven't done it. It's a new box set, a hardcover trilogy of Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune with gorgeous new cover artwork. It's new. It probably is in, if you have a really good new retail bookstore, it'll probably be there. It'll probably be behind the counter at the registers, so you can look at it and ooh and ah over it. I know I would like it. It would be a pure indulgence. Pure indulgence. I have ebooks of all of those books. I have new release paperbacks that I got from the publisher of the whole of Frank Herbert's Dune run. I have old hardcovers. I have old paperbacks. I have Science Fiction Book of the Month Club. I do not need. I have the Barnes & Noble Leatherbound edition of Dune. I don't have the Folio Society of Dune, but I have tons of editions of these books. I do not need to indulge myself. But isn't part of loving books occasionally indulging yourself? I think it's a legitimate part of it, and I haven't done it. I just haven't done it. I know that trilogy is out there in a box set of all things. I love box sets, and I just haven't done it. So the reason isn't It isn't money because I could buy them, and it would sting a bit for a day or two, and then I would forget about the price. The reason is mainly that it just feels so sybaritic. It just feels so sumptuous for me to get a new illustrated edition of these things when I have so many copies of them. I just haven't indulged myself. That's all. And then we finish up with scientists tag whales to help study their behaviors, such as migration. Tag 5 booktubers to complete this tag, and remember, save the whales. But this is an old tag, and besides, nobody's tagging me. I am a species out there in the wild that scientists are not eager to tag. So if you haven't done this tag and you like the cut of its jib, feel free to do it. But I'm not going to tag anybody directly myself. I had a great time doing it. I don't know about the repeated injunction to save the whales. I made it pretty clear on this channel that I think charismatic megafauna of any kind are doomed in this century. All of them in this century. Whales most certainly, yes. Most especially, yes. Whales are incredibly vulnerable. It takes forever for them to give birth. And they're easily locatable with new technology. New scanning technology can easily find them. So if you're on a ship that can outpace them and you want to kill 20 of them in one afternoon, you can. And there isn't a whale population in the world that can sustain that for more than 2 or 3 times. So they're easy to exterminate, is what I'm saying. And there's plenty of motive to exterminate them. Plenty of motive. All it will take is revanchist Trump-style fascists coming into power in the United States for us to withdraw from the International Whaling Agreement and start hunting them ourselves. That would take about a month. It would take about the length of the month of July on a calendar to exterminate all large whale species on Earth. They're that close. So I think the United States or no United States, that's certainly going to happen. So I don't know about save the whales. It's certainly a great idea. But I love the tag. Anyway, so I'll wrap this up for now for Tag Tuesday. And I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.